This is Simone.
And this is Katinka.
And you are listening to the Novotech podcast. We live in a time when technology is changing faster than ever before and transforming the way we live and interact with the world. The question is, how do we keep up?
In this podcast, we'll interview real people and certainly hear their tips on how to learn, adapt, and succeed in this ever-changing world of technology. Are you ready? Welcome everyone! Today we are talking to Amanda Varella. Amanda is a development team leader at Envato. She's also an Agile coach, accredited Kanban trainer, worked at ANZ, NBN Australia, and a few other high-profile institutions.
Welcome, Amanda, to our podcast. Thanks for accepting.
Thank you, Simone and Katinka. Good to be here.
So, Amanda, knowing that you are a trainer and development team leader, etc., tell us a little bit about what you actually do in your current position.
My current position, I'm a dev manager. So I have a team of software engineers. And you work in an Envato subscription product. It's called Element. It's a platform to provide digital assets for digital artists, creative artists, like stock photos, audio, web page templates, and everything that you need to create digital production, videos, and websites.
Did you always want to follow a career in tech? When did you realize you wanted to go down this path?
Oh, it was not always. I always liked technology. When I was a kid or a teenager, I liked computers, video game, but then I also had some artistic interests. And when I went to uni, I was doing architecture. So I've done one semester, but the thing that I missed in there was the technology. At the time, it was 1998. There wasn't so much technology at the architecture schools. It was a lot of manual work, drawing by hand. And it was something that I really enjoyed doing. It was when I decided, no, I really love technology and I want to work just with technology. Then I went to college, to uni of computer science.
What were the milestones in your career between what you mentioned, as you started going through computer science, coming from one semester in architecture to where you are now?
Yeah, so let's go to this long story. So this is about 20 years ago, a little bit more. So I finished my degree in computer science. It took 5 years in Brazil. While I was finishing my master, and there was a partnership with the uni where while we were doing the masters, we could work for some Brazilian companies. So I've worked for Brazilian government, Brazilian Navy, and have done some interesting projects in there. While working for the Brazilian Navy, I've managed to go to England. There was a unit of Brazilian Navy in England. It was my first international experience. And this one is one of the reasons that after this experience, I really wanted to have some more experience out of Brazil. And probably this led me to be here in Australia today. And once I was after I finished my master's, I went to a company in Brazil called Petrobras. Petrobras is a huge oil and gas company. And it's like one of the biggest companies in South America. For Brazil, like at the time, it was the dream of every young people, would pay a symbol of stable life. In a country like Brazil, that's pretty important. And I started working for there and stayed there for 8 years. And at Petrobras, in 2008, also started my story with Agile methodologies. Some companies in Brazil were starting to have their first experience with Agile. And it was something that in my team, some teams were starting to do. And I started to execute in my team, had some success. My manager had some interest in this and asked me to start helping other teams. At the time, as far as I can remember, there wasn't this term Agile coach. I think so. I didn't recognize myself as an Agile coach. I started as a Scrum Master, a leader of my team. And then it was working different results from the others. And then I started helping other teams. And like after some years, I noticed that this was a career that was in high demand in the whole world. And that eventually brought me to Australia, came to Australia in a role as a consultant, as an Agile coach.
It's really interesting. One thing led to another, and here you are. So probably it's a very interesting position to be, that you are, in demand. You found that way to find your position.
Yeah, I think that I was fortunate that, like in the world of software engineering, I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to be in different positions. So I started as a software engineer. I filled like business analyst positions. And then at the time, we didn't have Agile, we just would call like a project manager or a team lead. So I think that this was very important, being able to have this broad experience in different roles. So I could understand what was going on. And as I was acting as Agile coach, to be able to understand where the best place to intervene and to try to optimize the work from those teams.
I would like to learn a little bit more about what Agile is and why do you think it is important to have an Agile mindset in tech?
The thing about Agile, it was interesting. After I finished and everything that I've learned in uni and the way to manage projects and the approach that was really close to buildings engineer never sound right to me. Like at the time, what we would have learned is that we need to plan. If you plan more, your results are going to be proportional to the amount of plan that you do, that you work. And this is software development. We have an approach to engineering, but it's different. So planning more doesn't equate to better results. By the time you put your software in front of the user, you're going to notice things that you haven't captured. So Agile methods like around 2001, a lot of people around the world were having the same feeling that something was not quite right. And at this time, we had a lot of failed software projects. And the complexity of system, it was increasing. So we needed to have better ways of doing. And these conclusions started to converge. And this became the manifesto for Agile software development, with a lot of software engineers, experienced software engineers came to a set of principles that would be the new normal for software development. Another interesting thing that they discovered when people try to understand what was the main cause for software project failures, usually it wouldn't be related to planning or the software or any hardware. It would be more related to people and how they interacted with. So this was a great aha moment, I think so, that shaped like the future, what we have today. Now, Agile software development is almost the full way of doing things, where you do small interactions. We raise enough information so you can validate your hypothesis in small cycles, building incrementally to avoid those big failures of you planning or analyzing for 1 year to discover that there's nothing to do with what the user wanted. I think that the culture of startups helped even more to boost what Agile is. You cannot afford to spend so much time doing the wrong thing because your competitor is going to do, right? So you need to be able to validate quickly your hypothesis, put your product to test as soon as you can if you're in the wrong or the right direction. Now it's almost 10 years. So next year it will be 10 years since the Agile Manifesto. So it's not even a new thing anymore, right? The principles, they remain pretty updated to our reality. And it's interesting. You can clearly see us that we are like 20 years in the industry. The problems are pretty different to the ones that we had in the beginning, before understanding that the approach would be actually more close to experiment, to research about dealing with unknowns than to more deterministic approach. That's what we're trying to do in the beginning. So yeah, lots of interesting stuff, like the software engineering industry becomes so much mature in the last 20 years, not just with management practice, but especially with all the engineering practice like continuous deployment, test-driven development, and many other things.
I just want to ask you something specifically about the Agile. As you mentioned, the Agile Manifesto, or Agile in itself, has been out there for 10 years or so. But in my experience, there's still some companies, they actually are kind of new to the agile ways of working. And sometimes I have people coming to me and say, look, I don't work in a company or in a team that's actually doing agile or not doing properly. So have you come across that, and what would you have to say to these people, might be, I don't know, DevOps engineer or whoever in their position, that are not working with that? Can they do, trying to create that change by themselves, convincing? So how would you say to them to go about it?
Well, that's interesting, Simone, because in my experience as a consultant, as an agile consultant at Envato, we almost didn't even mention agile because it's something that the company is just like this, right? So I think that it's a pathway that some companies are going to arrive in there. Let's say, well, agile is not just a thing anymore. It's just the way that we work. In the past, when we didn't have so many companies going agile and you had to convince and to explain why that thing was better, I think that companies, they had a time to adapt, right? But now what's happening is that, yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot of companies that are still operating in a traditional mode, but the market is in there. The competition is there, right? And the laggards, the ones that were taking a while to adapt, they'll need to in a way or another. I think that the situation now of COVID is the biggest example, right? A lot of companies were reluctant in going remote, doing digital transformations and so on. And people usually, they say like, well, it was not the consultants who helped us transition to a digital world, it was COVID. And I think that's similar to this, right? If you refuse to have business agility, it's not just about agile, that we're talking about business agility as a whole, because agile started in the IT, but now lots of businesses are recognizing the need to be agile, right? So these ones who are not, that's not an opt-in, it's not a choice anymore. You have to do, you need to find ways. My preferred approach in terms, if I'm going to introduce Agile to an organization, is through Kanban, right? Because Kanban, it's a set of practices and principles that help you to introduce Agile in a lightweight way, like being respectful of roles in an evolutionary way. One mistake that lots of organizations have done was about introducing Agile in a very disruptive manner. Some people were not happy. So even giving a bad reputation to Agile, but it's not because about Agile, but because of the change management that wasn't appropriated, because the way that it was introduced. So many companies many people associated Agile with layoffs, with losing their roles, losing their identity. So Kanban proposed a different approach, like you start respecting the current roles, you start respecting the current process, and you start looking for opportunities to improve little by little. So you have a trajectory of improving your ways of working and becoming more agile over time.
That's interesting. It's how they implemented that was not successful yet. It's not the methodology yet, definitely. Knowing what you know now, if you would be able to go back in time, in terms of the agile itself, the pitfalls or experience, etc., what would you have done different?
That's an interesting one, Simone. I think that my career trajectory, I was lucky enough. There was a combination of luck and of choices. I think that one of the things I always try to be around good leaders, good leadership, regardless of the company. So I think that this allowed me to grow. By the time I noticed that leadership wasn't what I was expecting, wasn't aligned to my values, those were the moments where I tried to change ways, change areas, change companies. That was worked for me in terms of be with a leader that you trust, that you think that you can grow. And if it's not matching anymore, it's time to change. Looking back, every opportunity helped me build up to where I am today. So the experience at Petrobras, I spent 8 years in there. From these 8 years, 6 of them where I got a lot of experience with Agile. I've managed to know lots of people, amazing people in the Agile community in Brazil. After Petrobras, it was my opportunity to come to Australia and work as a consultant. Also, consultant life, not everyone who adapts to it, but it's an amazing opportunity for you to quickly see different scenarios and try different stuff, trying different approaches. So you cannot say that I regret on anything, but I would say that was a mix of lucky, but also choices. And I think that my resilience is a bit low in terms of being unhappy at work. I really like to work with a purpose. I'm really passionate about what I'm doing. So by the time things start, oh no, I like to wake up. Okay, let's do some awesome job here. Let's change this thing. Let's improve. By the time this excitement started to decrease, I could recognize that it was time to move, time to change.
So how did you realize that leadership was important? Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, interesting one, Katinka. So as I said, I started as engineer, business analyst roles. And I need to say that since then, since the beginning of my career, I already had a natural inclination, meaning that wherever I was in the team, and I think that's another thing for people who are listening, you can lead from wherever you are. It's a matter of behavior and a matter of interest, right? Not everyone wants to lead, but I had this naturally. So what usually happened, I would be in a team doing something, my database migration or my development or doing some analysis, and it would appear an opportunity like to try to solve things like people issues, team dynamics, and I would naturally fill that gap. And after some time, I just start filling leadership positions. And then eventually scaling to try to help some other teams and not leading my own team. So I spent a lot of time as a consultant agile coach, not leading my own team. So during this time, that was something that I missed. And that's something that I love to do. During my work as agile coach, I noticed that regardless of the team, regardless of my knowledge, regardless of the company, the deal breaker about the success of if I was going to have some results or not in a specific organization was related to leadership. So if I was lucky and I had a good leadership with a good set of values, wanted to change, wanted to do something good, we would have a very good results. But if I had a leadership that was more concerned with self-promotion, with political games and this kind of thing, there was nothing that I could do because that was something that I didn't know how to deal with. And then I noticed this pattern. So I started to think, well, it's not about anything, even agile practice on it. It's really about leadership. And after a while, I started feeling, well, I do not think that I'm making changes here. Eventually, I faced a situation where people were being like hurt on the not so good leadership. And I said, look, I think that I had enough. I would like to come back and be the leader that I'm trying to coach these people here to be. And I would have more fulfillment on my career. And then it's when I decided to come back to leadership roles again.
In terms of leadership, you had some opportunities, like you mentioned, but what would you say for someone who wants to go that path, but currently is kind of stuck? They don't have that opportunity. And of course, for you to change to another company, a new company that know nothing about you, changing roles to start as a leadership in another company is more difficult usually than being where you are now that you have proved yourself. So is there any training, anything that you think that would help those who want to lead in that space?
Look, I think that the better opportunity for you to go on the leadership path is to try inside your own company where you are right now. Because as I said, you can lead from wherever you are. Like in Kanban, we have something that's about encouraging acts of leadership. I think that if you can find opportunities inside your own company to try to lead. So for example, at my company, there's opportunities for secondment. So for people who want to go to the leadership path, you can try to for a specific amount of time to see if you like, because it's not easy. The most effective leaders, they are good people managers. And especially for us in IT, sometimes this gets mixed up. We have a very good technical person with great technical knowledge, but when they become a people manager, when they become a people leader, they're not as good. And it's not uncommon for these people to make this reverse movement and coming back to a technical role, right? So I think that for you to be a good leader, you need to like to work with people. There are going to be a lot of different issues. It's going to be hard, but it's pretty rewarding. That's what I see. I think that especially right now during this season, it's not easy to be a leader during the COVID season, but to be able to support people, you finish your day, sometimes you start a little bit disheartened because of the situation, but you finish your day with a sense of purpose, because on a daily basis, you can make difference in people's lives. So I think it's a call involved. It can be learned, but you need to see if there's something that you want to do. Sometimes it's emotionally taxing if you're really invested in the well-being of your team. And I'm pretty passionate about this thing. I can speak here for hours, but yeah.
And what are your thoughts on mentorship? Do you think it is important for people to have a mentor?
I think that's very important. And as a manager, sometimes, depending on the situation, if the manager, you can have your manager as a mentor. I think that's a good thing to do. But for example, when on your team, you find you do not have the skills to help the people on the team, you need to find someone who can help them. I do not have any mentor right now that I consider an official mentor, but in my career I had, and it was very valuable. Like on Kanban, I had someone where I could have my issues on a daily basis, having been with a team in a business, not knowing what to do. And you have the mentors, that person that went through some situations, through similar situations, can help you with some patterns about, it's not going to have the answers, because as human beings, different business, there are always complex situations, but an experienced person, they have more patterns that they might try to increase the chances of having success given a problem. So it's something that I encourage, like, for example, if you want to go into a leadership path, find someone that person is where you want it to be. It's going to save you a lot of time. If you want to go for a technical career, find someone. There's a lot of nice people around there who are able to give a little bit of their time, to maybe have 1 hour per week, 1 hour every fortnight. And I definitely recommend to have a mentor.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how do you keep up with advancements and trends in technology?
Yeah, my relationship with technology is an interesting one, because since when I started, after the uni in computer science, I was pretty close with technology. So as a manager, as a leader, I would pretty know everything that was going on. But then I started working more with leadership and helping other teams with agile practices and so on. So during about 10 years of my career, I stayed a little bit far from the technology side of things. And then while I was consulting, it was enough, because it wasn't actually needed. I wasn't a technical coach. It was more about management and delivery practices. So it was okay. But then in some point at my career, I decided to come back and to become a technical leader again. And that's what I'm doing now. It's not that I lead technically the part of the project, but I lead a team of engineers, and I need to be updated. So it was a challenge in my career I decided to take. I'm still working on it. I still have a gap of this whole time that lots of things have changed. But yeah, I'm keeping up with the tech right now.
And with all these challenges, all these things, how do you balance your personal life and your career?
That's in the same way that I approach helping organizations make better, with lots of experimentation. So I think that especially the second lockdown, was a great example of this. With this crisis, it was apparent to me that we do not like drastic changes. And sometimes these drastic changes are imposed into companies, on people. And it was very drastic. We didn't feel okay, because we probably so far we have tuned our lives to work in a certain way. There was the impact of the first one. It was pretty hard, but when the second one hit, I said, okay, let me have a calm approach and try to understand and do experiments. So the experiments around homeschooling, how would my work hours would work best? How would I organize my meetings, and evaluating like in a feedback loop approach, pretty similar to what the same techniques that I use at my work, I try to use at home. Meaning that if it's working, we're going to keep doing, improving on this. If it's not working, we're going to discard. That's it. Like, it's an empirical approach to try to understand where my sweet spot in terms of contentment and happiness, given the current situation was.
I loved your approach. I think we could be talking for hours here, right? But considering the time that we have, what would you say that you are curious about right now, and what would be the next thing that you want to learn?
As I've mentioned, having this technical gap, because I wasn't working with technology for a while, I'm trying to invest a lot in understanding how the new technologies are, the technologies on back end, on front end, how things are operating at the cloud. Today, for you to put a product, there's a combination of lots of services. So I'm really investing on the technical side of things. I think that I usually do a good job in the management side of things. There's always lots to learn, but now I'm enjoying going back to programming again. I do not have any pretension of becoming an engineer again, but I would like to have the level of comfort that I had in the beginning of my career, to be able to support the team in their decisions and help facilitate discussions, for example. So it's a comeback. I'm really investing in my technical career while never stop working, because technology changes fast, but human beings, like, there's always better ways of doing things. Again, the example now where people are so fragile, we need to be even more kind. We need to understand different needs. We need to understand what we need to do to increase this sense of well-being, psychological safety in the team. So trying to keep these two tracks up to date, but with the technical one lagging behind and putting a little bit more effort on this.
Great. Oh, that's true. We are all kind of in the same boat with this pandemic that changed a lot in our lives. So let's hope for the best.
Are there any tools or technology that you would recommend to peers so they can improve their agile skills or leadership skills, or anything they can use in their day-to-day work?
I think that in this remote world, there are things that you need to have, like some tool to manage the flow of your work. So there's simple tools like to manage simple workflows like Trello, but there are some others, some more advanced tools for you to do more complex workflows like Swift-Kanban or Kanbanize. I would recommend those. And also the communications tool like we have been using Slack for workshops, Mural or Miro. There's one that I'm particularly like that helps me a lot with automation. It's a Zapier. So Zapier is a tool that allows communication between lots of different tools, like between Google Drive and Slack. So you can automate a lot of things that you need to do manually. So I'm a big fan of Zapier. I would definitely recommend. Like, here's, you're going to have a look, announcements to your team, scheduling, checking, repositories. There's a lot of nice things that you can do with Zapier by integrating email, Google spreadsheets with little code. So yeah, I think that these are the main ones that I've been using recently.
I have actually two questions. One of them would be if there's anything in particular that you want to talk about that we haven't discussed yet. And in the mix, if you would have any book, non-technical book to recommend.
Over recommendation, I think that as the example that I gave, that's something that's present in my work life and in my personal life, is this approach to experimentation. Like something is not working, we stop, think, try to analyze. Sometimes it's a process, sometimes it's a specific thing. You try to understand what's not working, and you do a small change, a small experiment to see if that's going to move you to a better place. I think that this works for life, for work. This kind of philosophy that I have in my life, small experiments, and you keep, like, after a while, if you look after the horizon of 1 year, for example, small experiments, they compound into a big thing. That's one thing. And you mean book that's non-technical?
Non-technical, yes.
Non-technical book for me, like, is the most famous book and most read book in the whole world. For me, it's the Bible. I think that I have found many of my challenges and struggles in there. So there's no way, if I had to choose only one, that's the one.
Okay, great.
Well, I think I don't have any more questions, but maybe you could tell us how people can find you. They listen to this podcast and they want to reach out. What is the best way and what is the best place to find you?
I think that the best place, LinkedIn. Currently is the social network that are most active. And yeah, LinkedIn is Amanda Varella, 2 L's on LinkedIn.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, we're going to share the link in the notes of the podcast so people can find you easier. And is there any other thing that you wanted to talk before you wrap up?
I just would like to thank you the opportunity of opening up this, what I've imagined is a series of podcasts. It was a pleasure to be here with you, and wish you success with the podcast and the next editions.
Yes, well, we only have to thank you for your time, of course, sharing your story and your patience.
Yeah, thank you for being our first guest. I really enjoyed talking to you today. I learned a lot about Agile and leadership.
Yes, probably, well, I'm just thinking ahead, but we should be having a subsequent conversation on these topics because I think there's so much to talk and you have so much experience to share that it's a shame only to use, this short period of time. Yeah, just keep in the back of your mind that we'll be coming talking to you in the near future.
Sure, happy to do it.
And yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening in today. For me, the most interesting takeaways were about leadership. Specifically, if you want to become a leader, it's better to start in your own organization than to look for an external role. And even though it's extremely obvious, I never thought of the human element when it comes to leadership. It is not just about being more senior and having more knowledge in the field. Actually, you do have to like to work with people if you want to become a great leader. Thanks for listening. Until next time.